All right, I think we're ready to get started on the monthly market report for June 2022. My name is David Childers, and for the next, 20 or 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the hottest topics in real estate right now. You know, every month we do the monthly market report so that you can be the most educated professional on all the topics that matter to the clients that you serve. So, you know, we're going to talk about where we're at in the year here in June, almost halfway through the year. And what we're seeing, starting to see a little bit of a shift in the market. We're going to talk about interest rates. We're going to talk about where the market sits right now, and then ultimately what's ahead today. So I'm going to jump right in, make the best use of our time, and we'll start here with this, sort of statement. It's all been about mortgage rates. You know, if we think about the first 6 months of this year, they've certainly, the market has been defined by rising mortgage rates. There's an old saying, when rates rise, they take the elevator, and when they come down, they take the steps. And no doubt we've seen this quick and dramatic rise in mortgage rates. So let's take a look at what's happening in mortgages right now. We use this, we like to use the weekly monitor from Freddie Mac. The average 30-year fixed, 5.09% in this country. Sam Cater, the chief economist, said this: mortgage rates continue to inch downward this week, but are still significantly higher than last year, affecting affordability and purchase demand. Heading into the summer, the potential homebuyer pool is shrunk and supply is on the rise, and the housing market is normalizing. This is welcome news following unprecedented market tightness over the last couple of years. So, seeing this flat, movement in mortgage rates, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. I also clipped in here on May 19th where he said economic uncertainty is causing mortgage rate volatility. And I think that's been the story, up until now, is that a lot of economic uncertainty, a lot of things, inflation, instability in the world, what the Fed's doing, all these things are happening, causing mortgage rate volatility. One thing I do want to note on here, though, and I think you're seeing this happen in the market across the country, is adjustable rate mortgages. Still good pricing right there on a 5/1 ARM, a good product for those that are looking, and it fits for them. You know, back in the housing crisis, adjustable rates got a bad name, not a bad product, maybe a misused product at times, but still good pricing out there on adjustable rate mortgage if that's right for someone that you're working with or somebody that is looking to buy right now. But let's look at the rate environment going all the way back to the beginning of the year. This is look going back to December 30th of 2021. We wrapped up the year 3.1% in the average 30-year fixed, and we've sort of seen this quick and dramatic rise in interest rates over the first several months where we started to clearly plateau sometime around the third week in April. And in the last several weeks since then, we've kind of moved horizontally versus up. Well, that's a good thing, right? We don't want to see mortgage rates go higher, as it eats into affordability, eats into the purchasing power that consumers have when they come to buy a home. But we can clearly see this plateauing trend. What we can't say is have rates peaked. We can't say if rates are leaving. Nobody's got a crystal ball. I'm going to talk in just a minute about what's ahead, but you can clearly see that there's a plateauing in rates where we've moved horizontally over the last several weeks. If I were to bring perspective into this, and this is the graphic that I would recommend you use as you talk about where we're at in the rate environment, it's this one right here, and no doubt you've probably seen it. Average 30-year fixed, 5.09%, higher than where we've been for the last decade, but below where we've been in previous decades before this, going all the way back to the 70s. And I think this is important because sometimes in our business, we may say, hey, well, the interest rate is 5% right now, but be thankful because back in the 70s, they used to be 1,000%, and you should like what you have. Well, we need to acknowledge there are a lot of people that have gotten in the business, have just become homeowners, that this interest rate environment is higher than they've ever seen before. And we need to listen to that. We need to understand that, but also to bring them perspective. Certainly 5% on a 30-year fix for anybody that's been around in this business for some time is still a very, very good rate. It's all about perspective, but certainly seeing the shock of that in the first few months of this year. First half of this year, like I said before, first half of this year will be defined in the real estate business by rising interest rates. One of the things that I see right now, and I just want to bring this up, is many people in our business struggling with perfect advice versus expert advice. I've got an agent here that has sort of maybe an iPad in their hands. Maybe it could be a loan officer, whatever it is, somebody in our business, let's say there. And many people saying, what if I don't deliver perfect advice right now? Well, I want to say something to that. And I've said it before, there's a difference between perfect and expert advice. Nobody's able to give you perfect advice in any scenario. Oftentimes I think about the doctor that you would go see when you have an illness, and you come to the doctor and they say, okay, here's what we see, here are the symptoms that you're having, and here's what we're going to prescribe is the treatment for that. They're going to prescribe the treatment. That may be, whatever it is, medicine, surgery, all the things that we know, rehab. And then you're going to come back 30 days later, and they're going to then say, here's what we see, and here's the treatment we're going to recommend. That is expert advice. It's not perfect advice. And that's why we go to the doctor. That's why we go to an attorney. That's why we go to professionals for their expert advice. We can absolutely give people expert advice in today's market. One of the things I'd be saying to people that I was talking to is I subscribe to a service that gives me an up-to-date look at what's happening in the real estate market. And so, you want to talk about interest rates? Boom, we just talked about that. You want to talk about what's ahead? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. You'll have all that information. So be focused on expert advice. When experts change or when things change, we're going to bring that to you, right? That's the expert perspective we have. The next thing I'll say on interest rates, the expert advice on this, for the last 50 years, the 30-year fixed mortgage has followed the 10-year treasury. So the expert response to that is I'm following the 10-year treasury, and I'm watching that. And what have we seen this year? We've seen the 10-year treasury rise, and I'll show you this. Let's look at the 10-year treasury yield as compared to the 30-year fixed mortgage, and we've seen the 10-year treasury yield rise since January and starting to flatten out like we see in interest rates. But we're going to continue to watch that for you, because if you go back in time, I want to go back to this slide, the average spread has been 1.7. So think about that. Think about where the 10-year treasury is at 1.7 to it, and that's the 30-year fixed. Well, where are we at right now? Well, as of the first of this month, 2.2, the average spread, or the spread between the 10-year treasury yield and the 30-year fixed. We're going to continue to watch that as we go about. And I've got some information as well about what's ahead for mortgage rates from the Mortgage Bankers Association, but you can absolutely deliver an expert perspective in this market. Okay, so no doubt the first half of this year will be defined by rising interest rates. The other thing that I would say, as interest rates have risen, as we've seen, things happening in the real estate market, this question starts to come up: are we in a housing market correction? There was an article that came out, a couple weeks ago. I think Mark Zandi wrote it, and it said we're in a full-blown correction. I'm going to answer that question for you, but whether it is rising interest rates or existing home sales are down, are we in a market correction, or has the real estate market peaked? All of these headlines that people start to read that then become concerned with those. We always say headlines do more to terrify in a lot of these scenarios than they do to clarify what's actually happening in the real estate market. So are we in a housing market correction? Quick answer to that: no, we are not. Okay, why is that? Well, the technical definition of a correction of any sort is a decline of 10% or greater in the price of a security, asset, or financial market. So if you want to change the definition of a correction, then you can, and you could maybe say that. But if you go with the definition of a correction, we're not in a housing market correction, and you can say that confidently. Why is that? Experts are forecasting almost 9% appreciation in residential real estate this year. If you think about that, historically, we've seen about 3.8% appreciation in homes in this country, shot way up on that in 2020 and 2021, these sort of anomaly years in real estate. And we're still looking at very healthy appreciation this year. So not a correction there. Here's the word I would be using, or the phrase I would be using as I talked about the market right now. And it comes from Danielle Hale from Realtor.com. The housing market is at a turning point. We're at a turning point. We're starting to see signs of a new direction, but the ball is still in sellers' courts in most housing markets. Now, I'm going to get into some information in just a minute that shows where we're heading and where clear signs are. But let's remember this. We're at a turning point right now, coming out of 2 anomaly years in the real estate business, no doubt about that. But the ball is still in sellers' courts. We're still in a seller's market. They're still in just about every market, in those that I talk to, more buyers than there are available homes for sale. So what does this look like? I pulled a couple of slides that we like to use here on the monthly market report, first from showing time. And I think they're very interesting. This is a look at showing time going all the way back to the beginning of 2019. That's the gray area, 2019 and into the first couple of months of 2020. I'm going to call that pre-pandemic, okay? And in the blue section is everything since the pandemic hit up until the most recent information, April here, of showing activity. Now, I know we're here in June. You're going to say, well, April doesn't matter and it's going to come down from there. And I would agree, but that's the most recent information we have. Here would be my case and my point in this graphic and why I believe it makes sense to use it right now is we're clearly heading back somewhere that's going to be pre-pandemic level demand. Okay, so not going back to pre-pandemic prices, nobody's saying that. But if you look at demand pre-pandemic, certainly we're going to come off of the highs of 2020 and 2021 back to pre-pandemic level demand, which, oh, by the way, 2017, 2018, 2019, great years in residential real estate in this country. But that just gives a visual image to demand and where we've been, again, two anomaly years of real estate in 2020 and 2021, where interest rates dropped, the meaning of home changed across this country. And we saw demand and we saw price increases because of a lack of supply that we've never seen before in real estate. So where are we heading in demand? Back to pre-pandemic levels. Let's also go with the next headline that accompanies this. Are we in a market correction? And existing home sales are down. So let's look at existing home sales. This is look as of April, the seasonally adjusted rate, 5.6 million homes. Well, again here, let's look at 2017, 2018, 2019 pre-pandemic years, and then 2020 and 2021 that I'm going to go ahead and say again are anomaly years. Where are we heading with existing home sales? Back somewhere in the neighborhood of where we were pre-pandemic. But pre-pandemic sales were 5.3 million. Most recently here in April, seasonally adjusted 5.6 million units in existing home sales. That's not total home sales, just existing home sales. So if we look at that from a demand perspective, from an existing home perspective, really what we're looking at is a situation in heading back to where we were prior to the pandemic. And certainly the pandemic spurred the real estate market, and we could go into all the reasons. I think everybody that's watched the monthly market report for all the time during the pandemic knows that we've covered extensively the way that home changed. We've eaten at home, we've schooled our kids at home, we worked at home, and we know some of those changes are sticking around after the pandemic. We certainly know the drop in interest rates fueled people that wanted to buy and said now is the time for a lot of different reasons. And so as interest rates have risen, starting to moderate the market, bringing us back to pre-pandemic levels. Okay, but if you were to start to look at where have we been in this market and where we are, most recent information, average days on market as of April, 17 days in this country. Still a very, very hot, I would call white hot market. So we're coming out of this white hot market into maybe just a hot market right now. 17 days on market. The average number of offers of 5.5 offers on a home. So as you look at all the information, as you look at everything out there, the headlines that are out there hitting consumers, those who are thinking about buying, those who are thinking about selling and getting afraid, this is the perspective I would bring to them. Okay, we're heading back to pre-pandemic levels of volume in our business, which were great years in real estate. Okay, let's talk about this third topic. What's ahead? I always say nobody's got a crystal ball in this business, and we certainly do not. But we're going to do our best to look ahead and say, what are experts saying about what's around the corner? It's hard to believe we're in June right now, halfway through the year here in 2022, looking to the second half. Certainly the first half, we've seen a shift in residential real estate coming out of the last couple of years, and a lot of people asking what is ahead. If you're a team leader, if you're somebody that's bringing content to a sales meeting, I would be talking about this. I would be talking about, okay, here's what experts are saying is ahead in the real estate market. First quote here from Mike Fratantoni, chief economist at the Mortgage Bankers Association. He says, mortgage rates are likely to plateau near current levels. I'm going to pause there. So what Mike Fratantoni is saying is mortgage rates are likely to plateau. We can already see the plateau. Can't tell you if it's a peak, but I can definitely tell you it's plateauing. His perspective is they're likely to plateau where they are in the low fives right here. The financial markets have attempted to price in the impact of the Fed's action over this cycle and are likely also pricing in the economic slowdown that will result. Once we are past this rate spike and associated volatility, the Mortgage Bankers Association expects that potential home buyers may be more willing to re-enter the market. So home buyers maybe in a rising rate environment go, whoa, we want to know, we've talked about it has the ability to take people off the fence. Some go one way and say we're not going to do it, and some go we're going to get in before it goes any higher. But as rates plateau, this volatility subsides, they're saying they expect more potential home buyers to be willing to enter the market. Okay, so interesting perspective there on rates. If we look at total home sales, just a minute ago, we looked at existing home sales. This is a look at total home sales forecasted this year from Fannie, Freddie, MBA, NAR, everybody we look at. Anywhere from 6.9 million homes sold this year to 6.1 million. To put that in perspective, in 2021, we sold 6.9 million homes in this country. Okay, most would say in the interest rate environment we're in, we're likely to see, that impact the market to the tune of about 6%, about 10%. So as interest rates rise, we're likely to see that impact the market to about 10% less in home sales. Well, if you take that 6.9, it's about 700,000 homes less we would sell this year. Okay, so these forecasts 6.1 to 6.9, I think all have to do with what happens with interest rates, what happens with consumer demand, what happens with the economic uncertainty that's in this country. But that gives you perspective on total home sales this year, forecasted to be a very, very good year for residential real estate. Next point about what's ahead. Experts don't believe the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards, like during the Great Recession. The nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider homeownership. That's likely to keep prices high. We've talked extensively about, we're not in a bubble, a crash is not coming, but what's important here that I would pay attention to in this quote is that millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider home ownership. So millennials are working through the peak home buying years. We know they are the second largest generation behind the baby boomers, just behind them just a little bit. But as they move through, they're driving demand. We know we don't have the number of homes on the market for the number of people that want to buy them. That's not going away tomorrow. And that lack of supply keeps upward pressure on prices across the country. So those that are wondering, are we in a correction? Are homes going to lose value? We can bring the expert perspective. We also can bring the real world perspective of what's happening with millennials and the demand they're bringing to real estate. I think when we think about, our how's the real estate market, one thing that's at a fever pitch right now is the call for, are we heading into a recession in this country with the Fed's action of raising the Fed funds rate, which, oh, by the way, is not the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. That's intended to slow the economy. If that's not done precisely, that puts us, potentially into a recession, and we'll kind of watch that going forward. But if we think about this topic, I think it's one we need to engage on. We need to talk about as we meet with people and certainly talk about their concerns. So just a couple of things on recession. Recession is defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And the technical definition is a significant decline in economic activity spreading across the economy lasting more than a few months. And they go on to say that. And there's also kind of an industry definition that we have of 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, but it's defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and that's their definition of a recession. recession as you get into the technical elements of it, not suggesting that we need to be, become experts on the technical elements of defining a recession. But I think every time somebody who's a homeowner hears recession, they hear housing crash or they hear housing crisis because of what happened back in 2008. We've talked about this extensively. If you've watched the monthly market report and you followed it, you're well aware of that. Here would be my coaching. Don't think that everybody understands this or everybody knows it. We've used this graphic during recessionary times. It's a study where we went back to the early 80s to prove that recession doesn't equal a housing crisis. If you go all the way back to the early 80s, there have been 6 recessions in this country. And what happened here, you can see it just in the graphic. 4 out of the 6 times, home prices actually appreciated. 2 times they depreciated. Early 90s, less than 2%. I'd call it marginal depreciation. But what everybody remembers is in 2008, when homes lost almost 20% value. A lot of people were hurt then, a lot of family members, a lot of people that maybe we know and all know, maybe ourselves had to make decisions on housing or do something, a short sale, deed in lieu, foreclosure, whatever it was. A lot of people affected back then. And when they hear recession, when consumers hear recession, they think that. Many people think every time we hit a recession that homes lose value. Simply not true. And we can use this graphic to prove that as we're getting this information out in the market. Maybe people we work with, maybe people in our office believe that, and we want to get this information out in the market. I think if we use this information about what's ahead, we can guide clients in the best way possible. And I'll wrap with this quote from Shivani Pearson, mortgage expert. If you're looking to buy a home, I would still recommend you do so even at higher interest rates, because we have no reason to believe that home prices will stop appreciating. Home values going up is only a problem if you're trying to buy. When you own, it's a gift. That's great perspective. When you own a home and prices are rising, that means equity. We've talked extensively about equity, about the difference between a renter and a home buyer, a homeowner, and the difference in their net worth. A lot of that, the majority of that, is through home ownership. If you're wondering about how to get the message that we're talking about here on the monthly market report out in the market, I want to tell you this: the summer buyer and seller guides are available. These are built for you, come out each quarter with updated information for everything that somebody that's thinking about buying, thinking about selling needs to know. If you're not using this with the clients that you serve, I would highly, highly recommend you use them. They're great to leave behind in an open house, or maybe in your office or somewhere where people are congregating that may want this information, that are wondering what's happening in real estate. Go grab those summer buyer and seller guides, download those in your account if you haven't done so already. The other thing I'll mention here, June is National Home Ownership Month. New reason to own images are in the member area. All the things that we think about that are the non-financial benefits of home ownership, from the comforts of home to your ability to express yourself personally, to the stability and security that home brings. All of that is very, very important, and we want to be vocal about National Home Ownership Month and the reasons to own a home that are beyond the financial reasons, all the personal reasons that we know every day. And I would say the driver for many, many of us to get into this business, to see people own a home and achieve the American dream. So grateful for the time that you invest in the monthly market report. Thank you for that. On behalf of our team, we are grateful for it. We'll be back next month with the information you need to be the trusted advisor to the clients you serve.